promulgating anti-Semitism through their education literature. Do I remember that right?
That's right.
So how do we get in, are you actively engaged in getting NGOs to go into countries and to combat this at the very lowest levels, including preschool care, kindergarten, if you will, and up? Are you actively engaged in trying to employ the help of those people, the churches? I don't know what all kinds of organizations would be in those countries. You're coming to us and you're saying you need our help, and rightfully so, and I want to be, count me as being part of that help. But are you doing more than that? Are you going into the countries? Are you talking to people, to NGOs, to churches, to synagogues? Part of Americans' history was that when King George was really doing a number on us back in colonial days, the preachers in the churches stood up and spoke out. And I think we need that kind of groundswell and that kind of support from ordinary citizens. Are you going after that kind of support?
Well, it's a very good point. I think that, and behind it, I think, is that this idea that change has to come from within these societies and at the ground level. And in fact, we've talked to a lot of people in countries where this kind of education has taken hold, and there are many who are dissatisfied with that, but have few alternatives. It's a massive societal problem, and one that I think the U.S. government could do a lot to address with funding of the local groups who want to make a difference. There's a limit, I think, to what organizations like mine that sit in New York and Washington can do on the ground there, but I can tell you that there are a number of people. This is not something that needs to be imposed from outside. There are plenty of people on the ground in these countries. They are fearful, but they need support. They're not getting support in their own countries. And many of the countries, this is a circle of repression that you, Mr. Chairman, know so well, with governments who try to cut off funding for those progressive groups who are trying to make a difference, and they need to seek funding from outside. So that's something that the United States can be doing, is supporting the various civil society groups, religious groups, education groups, and others who are trying to promote a more objective and invest in the long-term education of their children.
Okay, let me put you all on the spot. If the Saudis are indeed engaged in that practice, and I have no need to doubt that you're correct, would you also, I'm going to put on my energy hat for a minute. I think that if America becomes energy independent and we don't export dollars to the Saudis in exchange for energy, then it actually helps us on two fronts. Would you agree? And would you help spread the word that America needs to be energy independent? I'm going to proselytize y'all from that end. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Amen.
All right. I see that my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Weber, thank you very much. I want to thank our very distinguished panelists. Because of time, I will be submitting, and I'm sure other members as well, questions. If you could get back to us with those answers. You've provided us incredible insights and suggestions, and I hope that many members read this record. It will be widely disseminated, and thank you so very much for your testimonies. I'd like to now welcome our second panel to the witness table, beginning with Dr. Thomas Falegi, who began his career teaching law and government in Hungary. He went on to become a research fellow at Harvard and earned a PhD in the United States. After teaching, he worked in the private sector before joining the Hungarian government to serve as Minister of National Development and then to lead Hungary's financial negotiations with the International Monetary Fund and European Commission. We'll then hear from Mr. Willie Silberstein, who has served as the chairman of the Swedish Committee Against Anti-Semitism since 2009, where he works to counter anti-Semitism through education. He has also worked as a journalist, editor, and commentator for newspapers, magazines, and television channels in Sweden, and as a foreign correspondent in Belgium. He now runs his own company that focuses on the media. We'll then hear from Rabbi Andrew Baker, who is the Director of International Jewish Affairs for the American Jewish Committee and the personal representative of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, chair in office, on combating anti-Semitism, and has been reappointed in each year since 2009 to that extremely strategic and important position. Rabbi Baker has served as president of the Washington Board of Rabbis, president of the Interfaith Conference of Washington, and I know I have worked very closely with him over these many years in combating anti-Semitism, and thank him again publicly for his extraordinary work. We will then hear from Rabbi David Meyer, who is a rabbi based in Brussels, Belgium, and professor of rabbinic literature and contemporary Jewish thought at the Gregorian Pontifical University in Rome, as well as the University of Louvain. He is also a regular visiting professor in universities in Peru and in China, teaching Judaism and rabbinic. He is also involved with projects in Rwanda, working with Tutsi survivors of the genocide of 1994. Rabbi Meyer has now published 6 books on theological and rabbinic issues. We will then hear from Rabbi Yaakov Bleich, who is originally from Brooklyn, New York, but moved to Kiev, Ukraine in 1989, where he was named chief rabbi of Kiev in Ukraine shortly thereafter and served in that post ever since. He has been instrumental in founding many organizations in the Jewish community in Ukraine. Rabbi Bleich has worked to advance interreligious and interethnic relations in Ukraine and around the world. And finally, we'll hear from Mr. Andrew Sarulevich, who is with the Anti-Defamation League's Director of European Affairs. He engages with European Jewish communities to monitor and react to anti-Semitism and analyzes European governments' relations with Israel and policies on the Middle East peace process. He previously worked at the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations and served as Executive Director of UN Watch Switzerland before his career in Jewish. And again, I'd like to say to all of our distinguished panelists, your full resumes will be made a part of the record. And again, I thank you for being here and for your testimony. Dr. Filecki.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It is an honor for me to testify for and about Hungary. It is the country where I was born and where, as a Jew and as a descendant of Holocaust survivors, I feel at home. Preparing for this public hearing, I spoke to executives of Jewish organizations, religious leaders, university professors, government people, and opposition figures. However, what follows here represents my ideas and my evaluation of the current situation. Mr. Chairman, I have submitted a written testimony, and I would like that to be included in the record of the hearings. I would like to anchor my brief opening statements on 3 main tenets. First, the rise of anti-Semitism has complex